Okay, well, in this message from Habakkuk, we are talking about God's poetic justice. Do you know what that idea means? It's not just a Janet Jackson movie from the 90s. What we're talking about here is this sort of ironic turning of the tables on the bad guy. We probably all have experienced that, right? Where, it seems like the bad guy's going to get away with something, and yet in the end, the bad thing they were trying to do ends up turning around and biting them. Kind of like I remember as a kid once seeing somebody trying to push somebody into the pool, and yet that person saw them coming and moved out of the way, and that person that ended up going into the pool themselves. That's poetic justice. And we see that take place in this story in Habakkuk. You see, it starts off because the prophet Habakkuk is upset at God because he sees that God is using the Babylonians to bring punishment to his people, the people of Judah. And he says, but God, the Babylonians are far more wicked than the people of Judah, and they're just going to get away with this? And he says, how can that be? That seems so unfair that you're just going to let these Babylonians get away with this horrible thing. And so in this section of Scripture in chapter 2, what God does is he reminds Habakkuk that, no, I care about justice too, and I'm ultimately going to do something about it in a very beautiful and poetic way. And so what God does is God gives a poetic reminder of his coming justice. See, in this passage of Scripture, really what it is it's a song, it's a poem, it's kind of a taunt song, kind of like na, 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 and it's a song that he gives the words to the song to the people of Judah, and he says, you will be able to use this to turn back, and this is how you are going to mock the Babylonians. In fact, in Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 6, God says, but soon their captives, that's Judah, will taunt them. They will mock them, saying, and then God gives them the words of the song. There's actually 5 stanzas in the song, and it all rhymes in the original language of Hebrew. It all starts with the same line of what sorrow awaits. But really we see kind of 2 categories of sin described here, 2 different types of sin. And they're very different, but yet God really dislikes them both. And here's what they are. The first sin is this. It's the sin of looking out for number 1. This is when we are so driven by materialism and greed that we are just willing to do whatever it takes to advance our own cause. We are looking to take care of ourselves and our family and our pursuit of happiness, success, and all that we want. And so we kind of are willing to take advantage of others and push people aside or step on people's heads as we climb the ladder to take care of ourselves. And there's a great passage of Scripture here. I'd encourage you to read it, verses 6 through 13, where God describes that this is what the Babylonians were doing. And yet as you read that passage, what you see is that God is going to take what the Babylonians were doing there, taking advantage of others, ripping them off, and he's going to turn that back around. And these people that they had taken advantage of, they're going to turn around. And he says, these people who you have plundered, they're going to plunder you. God reminds them that God's justice is ultimately going to prevail. And that's a reminder for us, because this isn't just a Babylonian problem. We can find ourselves looking out for number 1, selfishly looking out, to protect our own pursuit of happiness or our security or our family, so much so that we don't really care about others. We're just self-focused. And that's a dangerous trap that we don't want to fall into, because God takes it seriously. But the other type of sin that we see in this passage is the sin of living by your own rules. This is the idea that we don't like naturally as humans that there is a God who is over us as the creator, and he is the one who has created an objective moral standard that we are called to live by. Now, that just rubs us wrong. That goes against our pride as humans. And so what we do is we like to create our own moral standards. We like to determine for ourselves what is right and wrong for me based on what I like or what I feel like or what our society says is okay. And that's how we live. And in this passage, again, in Habakkuk, I encourage you to read verses 15 and 16 in chapter 2. God talks about what they were doing in very vivid terms. It's kind of like R-rated stuff you see there, you'll see in the passage. But then he connects their immorality, their sexual immorality, he connects it with idolatry. Because that's really what we do. When we say, no, God, I get to make my own rules, that's idolatry. We're setting ourselves up as God, or our society up as God, and saying, this is what I want to do. And God says, that's so foolish. It's foolish not only because it's offensive to God, but also because ultimately God has given us those rules to protect us. And when we live life according to the way God has designed, life just goes way better. And when we ignore that, it has a way of causing pain and difficulty in our life. And so God says, don't foolishly hope and trust in these false idols that you have created for yourself. They are worthless. Instead, trust in me. Now, this story really is the story of God's poetic justice. It can be beautiful or scary. It's kind of a two-edged sword, right? If you are following God and seeking to honor Him with your life, this can be really comforting to know that you are ultimately on the winning team. That it might seem like evil is going to prevail in the world around you, but don't worry, God is going to win. He cares about justice. He is going to prevail, and take comfort from that. But if you're on the other side of that and you're rebelling against God, you are looking out for number one, you are just sort of living by your own rules, this story should serve as a reminder that we won't get away with that forever, that God's justice is coming. But He gives us an opportunity to turn and experience His forgiveness, and He makes that possible through Jesus Christ.